In this video, I'll be going over the changes that have been made to Spellcaster over the week. I'm back into coding because I've sorted out my bugs, and I've made a bunch of changes to the tutorial, which I'm going to just go through in order of appearance. First things first, you'll notice that the ammo counter is now actually visible in the opening areas, and the health of the first enemies that you fight has also been reduced. I found that a lot of players were just kind of hammering away the attack button in this opening area, so this should hopefully encourage a little bit more slow play. Also, players should now be aware that they have a limited amount of ammo and they can't just mash, which is useful. This next fight is completely unchanged. Use fire 3 times, and then finish off the enemies to continue. That one was fine. Here the player learns about using the hookshot. This is something that has actually led to a change that physics props can also now be used with the hookshot as well. It was recently added that they can also be attacked. A friend pointed out that it would be useful to use the hookshot on them as well so that they can practice using that before actually getting into combat. Speaking of the hookshot in combat, here we are with this. I've added a little effect that plays out now when you apply a sticky bomb, which should make it a little bit more apparent that you've pulled it off, because otherwise it's fairly subtle, which is not great. Coming up now is actually one of the most significant changes. In this room, the player will actually learn how to perform dodges. This was one of the big choke points that I found a lot of players got caught up at. They would get a little bit panicked and would not fight quite as well as they should. So I've actually taken away the player's ability to attack until they've formed 3 perfect dodges, and then they can finish off these enemies. So until they actually demonstrate that they know how to dodge, that's all they're allowed to do, so they have to focus on that one thing. It's actually a trick I pulled out of one of the Batman games. It worked well there, and will work well here. This fight is largely unchanged. I did tweak the tutorial text in the bottom right to say just after perfect dodge instead of when all enemies are stunned, because the two are relatively synonymous, but a lot of players didn't actually draw the connection, so I figured it would just be easier to kind of spell it out. That's unchanged. This fight is also unchanged. Use haze 3 times, and then finish off the enemies however you see fit. Boom, boom, boom. That's that. This fight over here has actually been toned down significantly. Previously it was a fight against Guardian, who could only be taken out using supercharged melee. I changed that into a fight against 3 regular enemies who just want you to learn how to use regular melee, because having a player learn 2 things right on top of each other as well as having to fight a brand new enemy type is kind of excessive. So I toned this down, and I will teach about supercharged melee in a later part of the game. And then up here, this is the second most significant choke point. I haven't encountered a single playtester who was actually able to complete this fight, so I toned it way down in terms of difficulty and actually implemented a wave system so that not all the enemies have to come in at once, and their spawns can actually be staggered. I've also made a minor modification to how Spectacle works for this opening fight. It won't actually function as a damage multiplier, so your damage output is fixed in this fight, but it only functions as your health bar, and the function of Spectacle as a damage multiplier will be introduced later, just to make things a bit easier. And of course, enemies have their health reduced to compensate for the fixed damage output. You'll notice that little gradient on the tops and bottoms of the screen. That's to indicate how well or poorly the player is doing at a glance. So you'll see as my spectacle goes up, the gradient will actually come back in green, and when your spectacle is particularly low, it will actually appear red. That's just so that you can always tell kind of immediately whether or not you're doing okay, and you don't have to constantly glance up to the top left to see how your spectacle is. Another important note in terms of spectacle is you will notice in the bottom center now, you get a very clear indication of how your most recent trick impacted your spectacle, as opposed to this kind of subtle list on the left. This actually used to be a little text saying, I believe, keep your tricks and element types varied to avoid losing spectacle, which never occurred to me as being a really long sentence to have to read in the middle of combat. So hopefully this is a lot easier to look at a glance. And the other nice thing is that repeating a trick over and over also shows up with the text repeat trick to give you an idea that you're kind of overdoing it just a little bit. You'll notice there's the nice little wave text transition between waves. This right here is actually the last wave, so I will actually touch on one last little minor change that I made. In an update a little while ago, I changed the stun effect so that stun effects will actually stack on enemies. It turned out that that made enemies far too easy to stun for very long durations of time. So if you hookshot them and release gently, which is to say that you let go before you reach them fully, that will completely reset their stun reset time, which will allow you to use pellets so that you can keep your variety a little bit up. It's not super important, it's more of a upper tier trick that I found useful for my own play, so I implemented it, and now it's there for everybody to use if they want to. One last thing that I should note is that I was recently talking with my cousin, who is probably going to be responsible for the music in this game, and we came up with a pretty spectacular plan for this game's story, which means that I can finally get around to actually designing new stages and areas for the player to visit that will make sense in the story that we have planned. So I should start working on that soon, and all will be well. Other than that, I think I've covered everything. So thank you very much for watching, and have a great night. Bye.